Deputy Chief Minister, you have the call.
Madam Speaker, I rise to deliver the Ministerial report on the update to NT Corrections notified yesterday. Madam Speaker, I rise to speak on the state of the Northern Territory Corrections. The CLP came to office approximately 5 months ago, and we were elected on a mandate to reduce crime, rebuild the economy and restore our lifestyle. I got to work on immediately finalising and implementing the Corrections Infrastructure Master Plan due to the lack of action by the previous Labor government. We took decisive action to address the urgent need to increase correctional capacity while committing to long-term infrastructure solutions. Since August election, the prison population has risen by approximately 500 to an unprecedented 2,700. The Northern Territory has the highest imprisonment rate in the Northern Territory at just over 1,100 prisoners per...
Deputy Chief Minister, please take your seat. Leader of the Opposition, you have a point of order.
Notice the clock. Oh, that's okay. It's gone back on. Thank you.
Okay.
It was black. Thank you.
Please continue, Minister.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Northern Territory has the highest recidivism rate of 58.2% of people returning to custody within 2 years. The imprisonment rate in the Northern Territory is not something that we should be proud of, and it's something that we all in this chamber should be working to improve. This is something I'm committed to change, and this is something that the CLP government will be striving to change. This is not the legacy that our government wants to leave. Under the former CLP government, the imprisonment rate in 2015 was 885 per 100,000. So clearly it's gone up over the last 8 years. In 2016, Labor stripped funding from the corrections, crippling the prison industry program and creating a corrections system under pressure with the worst imprisonment rate in Australia. We acknowledge this surge in prisoner numbers was putting pressure on our corrections system. We are working to provide relief through expanding infrastructure and strengthening the workforce. Madam Speaker, we won't apologise for keeping criminals off the street and keeping the community safe, no matter where you live. That is what Territorians expect, and that is what they deserve after 8 years of gaslighting and neglect from the previous Labor government. Madam Speaker, while we've seen a significant increase in numbers, the overcrowding in our prison system is a legacy issue. It has been years in the making under the failed previous government. The former government ignored mounting pressure despite seeing evidence right in front of them, and they left us to deal with the crime crisis they caused. Prison numbers in the Northern Territory have exceeded the available bed capacity at the correction centres, and the prisoners are being held in police cells for extended periods of time, something that started under the previous Labor government. The Department of Corrections is dealing with significant challenges due to substantial increase in prisoner population. This has been rapidly increased from day one of the Labor government in 2016. There will be some say that this problem is caused by the CLP and its push to reduce crime. However, the people of the Northern Territory were very clear, and they voted for a government that has the will and commitment to address the issue. Crime is the #1 factor across the Northern Territory, and the CLP are committed to reducing that crime level. We want people, we want families to live in the Northern Territory and enjoy. Madam Speaker, we were left with a mess, and there are early warning signs of this mess. Back as far as December 22, it was reported that prison officers were placing prisoners on mattresses on the floors to make space, and talking about the warning that mental health and the safety of staff due to prisoners are at risk due to overcrowding. This is simply inexcusable, Madam Speaker. Holding prisoners in police watch houses is not our preferences. But the former government sat back and watched numbers grow year by year and ignored the warnings and the predictions that left us in this situation. But, Madam Speaker, how do we get to the positions? The warnings were there for 8 long years of inaction, which created this crisis. If I take you back to the early days of the Gunner Labor government back in August 2016, one of the first things that happened was that the standalone Department of Correction Services was pushed back under the Attorney General and Justice Department, putting the funding from this industry program at very short-sighted, but there are other warning signs that they ignored. They were told time and time again, back as far as October 2017, Madam Speaker, the ABC reported that the Darwin's prison population had reached a record high, 99.7% of the prison's capacity, and they did nothing. The funding that had been previously allocated by the former Country Liberal Party government for the development of the Northern Territory correctional industries was stripped away, and the position of the Prison Director of Employment was made redundant in 2018. Madam Speaker, Corrections Services New South Wales published an evaluation of prison employment and vocation training in custody in 2017, with one of the findings being that over a longer-term period, offenders who had worked in correctional industries were 24% likely to reoffend. And Madam Speaker, correctional industries is the welding shop, the woodwork shop, out helping the community, giving them a meaningful task to do, not just sitting in a cell and doing nothing, but actually learning skills. Shame job. Madam Speaker, it is obvious that the Labor government had no interest in prison employment programs or training or skills that would have given so many prisoners a level of skill that would have assisted them to gain employment when they left on their release. It's about breaking the cycle of reoffending and giving prisoners skills that they can go out into the community and be better people. Madam Speaker, on Thursday the 19th of April 2018, the ABC headlines were "Prison overcrowding prompts push to abolish mandatory sentencing in the Northern Territory." The news article reported that Darwin's prison population had reached record highs and levels of overcrowding, with jails in Top End and Alice Springs constantly over capacity. Madam Speaker, in May 2020, a riot at the Holtz Correction Centre caused tens of millions of dollars worth of damage. 3 years later, Labor released a report heavily redacted by an interstate correction expert who said there was little excuse for the Northern Territory government not to understand how to successfully manage a riot that caused $30 million of damage at the Holtz Centre. In true Labor style, Madam Speaker, they maintained the report was cabinet in confidence and exempt from freedom of information laws. Of course, they wanted to keep the report secret. It exposed all of their failures. On Thursday, the 18th of February 2021, the ABC reported overcrowded prisoners at critical tipping point. NT Parole Board Chair calls for immediate action. The ABC said the prison system in the Northern Territory is at critical tipping point, with facilities running constantly over capacity and inadequate resources for rehabilitation, according to the head of the Parole Board. You'd like to think, Madam Speaker, that a warning sign for one of our most respected Supreme Court judges and the then head of the NT Parole Board would have been heard, or at least some action or planning undertaken. The Leader of the Opposition, the then Attorney General, said corrections funding would be considered at budget time. No action, no response, just left to be considered at budget time, just to be filed in the too hard basket. A Justice Reform Initiative media release in September 2022 report stated the Northern Territory was a world leader in imprisoning its citizens. The report by the Justice Reform Initiative said that the imprisonment rate in the Northern Territory are one of the highest in the world and more than 4 times the Australian average, and yet no action. On Monday, the 5th of December 2022, the ABC headline was Northern Territory prisons facing unprecedented pressures and record inmate numbers. The ABC reported that numbers of the NT prisoners in NT facilities reached a record high on November 19, 2022, but again, no action was taken. Madam Speaker, these are just some of the evidence that this crisis we're in right now has been ongoing and was ignored by the previous Labor government. You would have thought that with the evidence that the prison numbers are going through the roof, that something would have been done, some sort of training, some sort of rehabilitation. But no, Madam Speaker, what they did was they cut the funding. You would have thought, Madam Speaker, that after all the media reports that something would have happened, but just the opposite. They buried their head in the sand, they did nothing. Like I said, they seem to think, to show that they weren't interested in rehabilitation, weren't interested in training and getting these people back out in the community as better people. Madam Speaker, I recall that even yourself, the member for Aralurun, raised warnings in 2022 that the correction system was full to the brim, with the Alice Springs and Darwin prison operating well above design capacity, and yet still nothing was done. The NT News on 26th of March 2023 reported NT corrections break records for prison populations, police watch houses used to overflow. The NT reported that the NT's prison population surged to a record high, with 1% of the entire territory population behind bars. Madam Speaker, this was the answer for the Labor government, the failed Labor government. Instead of spending infrastructure in prison just to put him in the watch house, and yet they have the audacity to go over and complain now. This is their idea, unlike the CLP. We've got a plan to get them out. The NT News on 11th of January 24 reported that the Northern Territory correction system was in a serious crisis, and there are growing human rights concerns for prisoners, advocates say, as inmate numbers soar to unprecedented levels with no long-term solution in sight. Again, Madam Speaker, this is all his reports say: no action, no long-term solution. Their action was put him in watch houses. Disgraceful. Madam Speaker, in January 24, there was a serious incident outside the Alice Springs Correctional Centre which caused damage to prison dormitories. Had the opposite been listening or taken heed of the warnings of yourself, Madam Speaker, maybe this incident wouldn't have occurred. Madam Speaker, the inaction by the Labor government exposed our correctional staff and strained correctional facilities under extreme pressure, and it is fortunate there were no injuries from that incident. Had the previous failed Labor government taken interest, they would have taken notice of the extreme issues confronting the Corrections Commissioner and his staff, and they may have addressed the rising prison numbers when the prison numbers were building. Now we would not have this crisis. Madam Speaker, you can't just pop up a prison. It takes planning, it's very expensive, and the previous failed government did nothing. Their solution was to let him out or just to put him into watch houses. Madam Speaker, our correction officers and our community correction officers are doing an outstanding job under very difficult circumstances caused by the inaction of the previous Labor government. However, they should be asking their union why the prison numbers and overcrowding was not highlighted to the government back in 2018, 2017, 2022. Why now? This has been an ongoing problem. It's been mounting for many years, and the pressure has been building with no relief from the previous failed Labor government. Madam Speaker, corrections had to use the police watch houses to manage these numbers since 2013. A situation, Madam Speaker, that I'm determined to change. This is simply inexcusable, Madam Speaker. Holding prisoners in police watch houses is not our preference, but the former government sat back and watched numbers grow year by year by year, ignored the warnings and the predictions, and left us with an overcrowded, broken correction system. Turning around the crime crisis created by Labor will take time, but we're already taking action, as we promised, Madam Speaker. But unlike those opposite, we have a plan. This government will fix the mess they have left us, but it will take time, but not 8 years, because there is no quick fix. Madam Speaker, the CLP is committed to the Infrastructure Master Plan to enable the capacity to expand to ensure we meet the immediate and future capacity. We are ahead of schedule. We are committed to support staff, planning and building a mature professional workforce to address repeat offenders. I've directed an independent review of prisoner classification process to be done to ensure that any future development and expenditure on facilities that accommodate prisoners who have been classified and held in most appropriate levels of security. Madam Speaker, the Department of Corrections and the Department of Logistics and Infrastructure and their sub-partner contractors have done an outstanding job bringing the old Burma prison back to life to a point where the facility is now accommodating 164 prisoners, months ahead of the original plan. And I'm going to congratulate them on doing a wonderful job. Madam, but I want to stress that this is an interim solution, and we're very clear about that. Our plan is to move prisoners out to Holts and make that the prison precinct. However, opening the Berrima prison is a crisis response to a crisis situation. The Corrections Commissioner is ensuring that this facility is secure and operational. By the end of the month, another accommodation block will be ready for a further 48 prisoners, and by the end of March 2025, the prison will be able to hold more than 300 prisoners. Corrections and DLI are, as we speak, adding beds to Berrima to enable movement from the Palmerston Police Station, Madam Speaker. Like I said, that is one of our plans, to get the watch houses back to the police. Madam Speaker, in just 5 months, we've already started to address the failure and invest in infrastructure, which is much needed to create new beds. But, Madam Speaker, there is much more to do. It has been a priority that to empty these watch houses, particularly Palmerston, and I can get these prisoners back into a dedicated facility. Alice Springs, Madam Speaker, we have a plan. We know that the 96 beds there additional, the Labor government planned to introduce, was over $10 million over budget. And of course overdue, late. We're preparing to the Barclay-supported bail accommodation to open. Youth offenders were going to be accommodated at Holts. The Holts facility is now operational since late 2024. Not to mention the $70 million in overspend and the 2-year delay. Madam Speaker, imagine the rehabilitation that could have occurred in 2 years. Imagine the extra prison officers or facility we could have used for the $70 million. But no, the failed Labor government wasted taxpayers' money, overspent, blowout after blowout, delay after delay, harming the young offenders because they don't care. They don't care about the young offenders. They didn't invest. Now we're left with a crisis. Madam Speaker, moving the children or the young offenders to the Holts is going to make a significant saving while make sure we maintain the quality intervention to these young offenders. Madam Speaker, having the single youth detention centres also helped us solve other problems, creating extra space for adult prisoners and, importantly, getting women out of the men's prison. This is a really critical part of our plan. I don't want to be in a situation where female prisoners are missing an opportunity because they can't move around inside a male prison. I've been to the Holts prison and I've seen the abuse that the female prisoners get. The planning by this failed Labor government is just unbelievable. What a mess. Madam, we know that the previous Labor government promised to get the police watch houses back last July. But, Madam Speaker, guess what? Another failed promise, another broken promise, because the watch houses are full. And even though that this Labor government promised to get rid of them last year, again, another failure. It's not ideal, and we want to get them out as quick as we can, Madam Speaker. And we're working on that plan to get that happening as quick as we can. Madam Speaker, we are looking at all options to reduce the overall imprisonment rate and alternative customs. We want to get prison industry back and running. We know that the lawn mowing service is being cut because of the crisis caused by the failed Labor government. We know that they failed to plan, and that's why we're here today, to outline our plan and to move legislation to give the Commissioner more resources. And I do note, no one's going to lose their job, Madam Speaker. This is about giving the Commissioner more resources to be able to provide a flexible workforce to ensure that this crisis situation is managed correctly, safely, and in a reasonable budget. Madam Speaker, the resulting community harm of having these people return to prison system is unmeasurable, and that's because this previous government failed to invest. We've had to cut those education systems, cut those programs of rehabilitation while we manage just the facilities we've got because this previous government failed those people. We have millions of dollars being wasted without any accountability, any meaningful results. We need to make sure that programs work. They actually provide better better young people, better prisoners out in the community, because that's what we need. We need to make sure that we break the cycle of reoffending. This previous Labor government clearly failed to do that because prison numbers have gone through the roof. They failed to invest in infrastructure. They failed to invest in the workforce, and the results are showing right now. But I want to be clear, Madam Speaker, if you commit a crime, we'll find you a bed. Community safety is our #1 priority, and we need to make sure that we keep Territorians safe, and we want to keep employees safe, the staff. We want to make sure that they are able to go home to their loved ones each night. Madam Speaker, I move that the report be noted.